Well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk to you all. So, I love being in Kumeyaay lands. The people and the history here are so strong, and I'm proud to be a fellow Indigenous Southern Californian alongside them. And I really appreciate the department's hospitality for hosting me here. Okay, so to give you a little bit of background on my journey to the Heyday Berkeley Roundhouse is I first became familiar with Heyday and Heyday Books and News from Native California magazine when I was an undergrad at Humboldt State, which of course is now Cal Poly Humboldt. I remember being drawn to the books as a student because I was growing in my consciousness as a California Native person specifically. And when I finished graduate school at Berkeley, I worked for a couple of years in television. And I was on assignment one day, and I was able to meet a gentleman by the name of Malcolm Margolin. If you Google, this is probably an antiquated reference, but if you ever Google Mr. Natural, this Malcolm Margolin character kind of resembles Mr. Natural. And he was the founder of Heyday at the time, and at the time the publisher. And so shortly after I met him, I was introduced to a woman who had the job that I have now. And her name is Lindsay Bear, and she and I became really good friends, and I started to become involved with the magazine, and I wrote for it. I was on the contributing editorial board and all that stuff, and it was wonderful. The people who worked with Heyday were intelligent and kind and warm, and which is something that means a lot to me, of course, and it was great to be a part of it all. So eventually, Lindsay told me she was planning to leave her position and said I should apply, so I did, and I was selected, and I've been the director of the Heyday Berkeley Roundhouse ever since. Okay, so what is Heyday exactly? So we're an independent nonprofit publisher that's based out of Berkeley, and we've been around for 50 years, or this is 51 years now. And so we have 4 pillars that kind of guide the work that we do and the books that we publish. So one pillar is social justice, another is history, nature, and then oddly enough, California Indian people specifically. And so during my presentation, I'm going to mention California tribes, California Indians, California natives, and what I'm referring to specifically is the around 110 federally recognized and more than 50 non-federally recognized tribal nations here within the boundaries of the state. There is a little flexibility just because, the borders of the state are like colonial constructs and stuff. So we do include a lot of people from Western Nevada, Southern Nevada, Western Arizona, and Southern Oregon as well. A lot of tribal people from those areas. Oh, and also Northern Baja, of course, because Baja is California. So we structured this program, the Heyday Berkeley Roundhouse, which I'm the director of. So it's the California Native Publishing Department of Heyday. And so across California, different tribal groups have had and still do have ceremonial houses. A lot of them still do have ceremonial houses. In my area, we call them big houses, but in tribes in the region where Heyday is, in Berkeley, they call them roundhouses. And they're places where people, go to have ceremonies and strengthen themselves through their beliefs and traditions. So we formed the Heyday Berkeley Roundhouse in 2012 as a parallel to this idea, with a particular focus on storytelling. So we publish about 2 to 4 California Native focused books a year, as well as the quarterly magazine News from Native California. And we also work to grow and strengthen Indigenous storytelling by fostering and supporting a lot of first-time authors through the publishing process, because it's a little bit of a complicated process if you haven't been through it before. And a lot of these folks that aren't traditionally part of the, there's an absence of a middle class and the leisure time to be able to produce a book. We help foster them through the process, and we've had fellowships for first-time authors and everything like that to help them with this. And thanks to the support of tribes, especially like the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria, we host a full-time, year-long paid writing internship for recent college graduates, to help them in their professions and working with California Native tribes. And we've had 3 interns so far. The first one, her name is Emily Clark, and she's a Cahuilla from Southern California. The second individual, she's Pomo Miwok and Wapo from Central California. She's in grad school right now at UCLA. And our current intern she's Hopi and Shwangi that's around Hoopa in Northern California. So we've had some really great regional representation. We've had a Southern California intern, a Central California intern, and a Northern California intern to participate in the program so far. And so some of the other work that we're able to do is because we partner with tribally focused organizations to participate and co-host events and everything like that. And we also serve as a hub for educators and for the public who are interested in learning more about California tribal peoples. We also, because we're a nonprofit, we provide free books and magazines to public schools, to libraries, to tribal education centers, and as well as to incarcerated individuals. A lot of people don't know this about News from Native California magazine, but a pretty significant part of our subscribership are folks who are incarcerated. Okay, and so you may be familiar with some of our titles, but in case you're not, here's a few of them that have been published in recent years. This is No, We Are Here, the book that Manuel was referring to, and then Bad Indians, which it circulates a lot in a lot of Native American studies classes and everything like that. If you haven't read it before, it's an absolute masterpiece. There's nothing like it, nothing else like it. And then the last book there, it's one of our pride and joys, Chimmy New, and it's more than just like a cookbook. It's a gathering guide. It's a book about Californian tribal foodways. And it's published by a first-time author, and she's a Karuk tribal member from way up in Northern California, up by the Oregon border. That's where the tribal homeland is. Okay, so News from Native California. So the magazine started being published in 1987. And at first it was a bi-monthly, and then shortly thereafter it started being published quarterly. It's a submission-based publication, so people from tribes across California contribute poetry and essays and photographs and artwork and news stories and interviews, opinion pieces, open letters. It's a really, really wide variety. And it's also another mechanism that we've used through the years to be able to foster authors, just by getting them into writing. And actually, Chimmy Nuam was developed out of a food column that the now author had put together, and that was very popular. And she had enough submissions and enough content at one point that we said, hey, let's turn this into a book. And luckily it was, or not luckily, but it was during the time, when we were all in lockdown, and she was able to really hone in and focus. She was a mom with kids, but she was able to focus and put this beautiful book together. And that was all that grew out of the magazine, out of her column in the magazine. Okay, in addition to the submissions that we receive, there are regular features that we try to have in each issue of the magazine. One of the columns that we have, it's called In Our Languages, and it was started by our former outreach coordinator by the name of Vincent Medina. And he's Chichenyo Ohlone, and he is a board member of the Advocates for Indigenous California Language Survival. This is a group that we've partnered with for decades in assisting and supporting in their efforts to save tribal languages, and so they're a wonderful partner of ours. But the concept of this particular column is to get readers to see different tribal languages that aren't translated immediately. So for most of the language that's featured, it's just in the tribal language when it's printed in the magazine. And the reader needs to visit the website to get the English translation, because his idea was, why should we have to, why do we always have to, translate our language and, kind of cater to everybody else, and when our languages should just be, which I think is wonderful. So probably one of the most popular features in the magazine and kind of the foundation of News from Native California is our events calendar. So this year's California tribal events for each forthcoming season. We have a column called Big Times, Little Times. And this is our news and current events column for the magazine. And so it's sort of a play on words, of course, because big time gatherings are what they have in the central region of California where Berkeley is. So it's like big times, little times. And it's just little announcements and important things, but just everything that we can gather up within the time frame of each quarter to report on to people and tell them about what's going on. Then we also do a column called With Respect that we feature for California Native people, as well as close friends to tribal communities who've passed on. Okay, So we have a website, newsfromnativecalifornia.com, and it's being that the print magazine is like quarterly, we bridge the time space in between with the News from Native California website. This is the majority of the work that our interns do. There's several different components to it. You know, we have a blog, which is our weekly stories that come in from California. So our interns write stories every single week that go up on the blog and are shared. We have an events calendar there that's more updated and larger and more robust. This is by far, like, I don't know if anybody comes to the website for any other reason than the events calendar, just because it's updated so well, and you know, that's another job that our intern does as well. We have a resource page for people that are interested in learning and connecting with California tribal people that people can visit. And then, of course, you can always subscribe on the magazine's website as well. I wanted to take the opportunity now to share with you, it's a short documentary that we produced a few years ago for the 35th anniversary of the magazine. So the video was directed and shot by a Northern Maidu filmmaker by the name of Cody Lusage. I'm hoping that this will give you a sense of the history and the impact that News from Native California has had for folks. And yeah, so let me see. Hopefully this will work right.
California, the place we call home. We have names for these places, passed down from generation to generation. We know the heat of the desert. We know the spaces between each pine tree, the dance of the waves as they meet the coastline, the shadows each mountain makes, stories traveled on the backs of runners, our oral tradition following them as they moved along ancient trails, now paved over with asphalt. The landscapes our people cared for become cities, and communication was replaced by a different form of news. It traveled in a new way, created more trails, and forged new bonds, strengthened by the sound of our voices. In the mid-'80s, California tribes were experiencing a cultural revival. At the same time, a publishing icon from the Bay Area was coming to life. Little did we know it would play a major role to support our efforts in the years to come.
Magazine and Malcolm, it's the time when we started, bam, learning our languages, bam, doing this. The biggest language revival, you know, the magazine supported that. And that's the way they supported the artist. If this is real to you, then we will make sure others see it as real.
I remember seeing the first edition of News from Native California, and it had a Yurok guy on the front. So there it was, and I read it. Wow. Pretty interesting. It was kind of a lackluster, black and white kind of a thing going on.
The story is, the way that it started was Malcolm Margolin and Vera Mae Fredrickson were having lunch, and they came up with this idea of making a calendar of events that would serve people throughout Native California. And then David Perry, who was a Coast Miwok, the third co-founder.
Heyday Books existed before news. It's kind of an underground publishing house. By the seat of your pants, stuff was getting published.
But they got it done, and all those boxes of books that they had underneath all the kids' beds at his house, and then they'd load up the car and go around all over the place and get bookstores to take his books. And so that was Heyday Books. That was the start of it.
Over the next 28 years, Malcolm Margolin and his band of misfit journalists traveled across California, visiting, forming relationships, and earning our trust.
Yeah, well, you know how it is in Native community. You know, they're not just gonna say, oh yeah, come right here. They're gonna check you out, you know, kind of feel you out and see what you're all about first. You know, give you a chance. I mean, no one's necessarily gonna be rude to you, but they're gonna wanna see what you're about. And I think Malcolm is a very genuine person.
So when I first saw Malcolm on the reservation here, Malcolm is a listener. He knows how to listen.
The majority of these dolls that I have up here are made by Vivian Snyder, lives up on the Hoopa Reservation. And she gave me this one, and guess who that is? It's Malcolm. She made, I think, maybe 3 or 4 of them. My mother got the magazines when they first came out, but she also was the person who introduced me to Malcolm Margolin.
then when he did write, when the first thing comes out, or the way he would talk about us, was beautiful and warm. I don't think it ever went romanticized, and it could have, but it didn't, because he was talking, and the authors were quite often us, and when he would talk about us, it was what we were actually doing. It's the time when we started, bam, learning our languages, bam, doing this, bam, you know, it changed. But then he saw the excitement of all that and the beauty of all that, and just eased right into that next wave of us. It allowed us to keep trusting him.
I was fascinated by the first issues of News from Native California, and over time Malcolm began to show his sincerity by creating space, opening space, you know, publishing, providing the opportunities. So it was never about him.
He was never trying to appropriate, being present, getting to know people as people, and the people were always more important.
They were immersed in the people's lives. I think that might be the difference. And their observations were real clear. Their observations were who's doing something.
He asked me to write an article on the Hoopa York Settlement Act, written on this little teeny square, you know, Macintosh. Later on, Janine came on. Parts of the magazine were starting to grow.
The Heyday office was a lot more like a clubhouse than a publishing office, right? Like, there was an open door, there was a pot of coffee on. Lynn Risling would come down and visit. Julian Lang had an office there. Outside Malcolm's office with a big round wooden table, and just at any point you could just find people there. They would gravitate there.
We were thinking more of ourselves as, you know, guerrilla reporters, I guess.
Being in the office, and Malcolm would come in and be like, "That's it, everybody put your computers down, or we're going to a big time, like get in the car."
You know, traveling light, you know, get in the car, drive all night, wake up in the morning in a new place.
You think it was gonna last one day, and then like 4 days later, you would finally get home. The rest of us were tagging along making a magazine, and Malcolm was just out like seeing friends and learning about the world.
The integrity of the magazine grew, and with it, its popularity. It had struck a chord among our people and represented an authenticity that was undeniably Native California. It became something to call our own.
Was amazing. You know, I think it paid homage to the California people and what we do, our culture, our traditions.
Like we're saying, we're all from a place, and if you go to that place, there was culture attached to that place. You were either fishermen, hunters.
Our song, our dance, our language.
Painters, photographers, basket weavers, boat makers.
A lot of the traditions that once again had life breathed back into them. They use the term revitalization, renaissance. It's breathing life back into the language, back into the baskets, back into our canoes, back into our songs, back into our foods, back into our medicines. Go on and on and on, back into who we are as a people. We did not fall into their template. We weren't my fine feathered friends with their war bonnets and the teepees. You know, this is a really sensitive thing to say too. Here in California, you always had to confront that. The powwow community, because LA, Orange County, has the largest Native American population in the United States. But the majority are not California Indian. The majority of these people have not had a relationship to California Indians. This was one of that moment when we became elevated and we could hand it to them and say, see, we're still here.
Over the years, the magazine went through several stages of growth, and in 2015, a new editor, one of our own, who would again revitalize the magazine, and for the first time would be based out of Southern California.
I met Terria when I was the editor of news, and she was a journalist at FNX. I think I knew on that first day that I wanted her to be the next editor.
I love Terria. She's a lovely human being. Really is a lovely human being.
Having her in that position helped us down south too, because I think News from Native California, because it's produced in the Bay Area, but now she knows and recognizes the Southern culture, so she has the ability to enter into communities and balance it out.
Terria is the first Native Californian to run the magazine.
Now I think they have a pretty slick magazine.
We all just get to steward it, right? You just get to carry it for a little bit of time and then you hand it to the next person and they get to carry it.
I'll just conclude my presentation by sharing some of the best ways you can support the work that we do and get involved in kind of, our little community with Heyday and the Roundhouse and everything. But most important thing we always encourage people to do is subscribe to the magazine and then order our books, of course. And then if you can attend California Native events in your area and learn about tribal people, that's a good thing. And if any of those things are out of your reach for one reason or another, then please find us on social media and follow us and everything and kind of be a part of our online community. We'd love to have you all. And that is all I've got. Thank you for attending and listening. And if you have any questions, I'll take those now.
Maria, any questions from our audience?
How did they name Heyday Books?
Wow. That's a good question, and I don't know the answer. I'm not actually sure. That's actually a really good question. I'll have to come back to you with that. I think that I've heard a little bit of pieces of a story about how the name came about, but I don't know exactly, and I don't want to, misspeak. So I'll come back to you with that.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much for talking to us. I just wanted to, I know there's a lot of undergrads in the room, so I thought kind of for their sake, maybe for students, current younger folks looking at the sort of publishing industry and seeing, it's in a really different place than when something like Heyday Books or this magazine started. I was wondering if you might be able to speak to some of the avenues for creating radical publishing and journalism projects now and how you've seen the landscape shift in your career.
Okay. A shortcut, if you ever get the chance to please watch the movie American Fiction, it's a very good commentary on our industry. And a friend of mine who also works in publishing, she went to go see it with her sister and they were like, and her sister asked, is that really what it's like? And she says, it's barely an exaggeration. And it's true. So that is one place to start to see if, okay, this is of interest, because that's kind of like that's kind of what you're getting into a little bit. Publishing, there's a lot of different dimensions and there's a lot of different ways that you can engage in publishing. A lot of people hear about, I guess, what is it, the Big Four, the Big Five, Random House and Penguin, all those. And then there's independent publishers like what would I work for. There's a lot of us out there. And then there's also, academic publishing. But what's really cool, what's been happening and what's been kind of going on for a while, for a few decades, is that, at least in the work that I do, there's a lot of native publishers. There's a lot of tribal publishers. Malky Museum Press has been around for a really, really long time. They publish very important books like language dictionaries and anthropological research and stuff like that. They're a really good one. There's a publisher named Great Oak Press that's published through the Pechanga tribe. They're really, really good. They do amazing work as well. And it's the one thing I love the most about publishing. I've worked in, before as my career as a journalist, I've worked for newspapers and worked in television and everything. Publishing is at least at my level and with independent publishers, it's the least competitive industry I've ever worked in. We are so good about helping one another over the wall, and it's better, at least in my perspective, to see a new publisher come and be successful rather than see a publisher fail, because there's implications for the rest of our industry when that happens. So it's always better even to see a new publisher come up and even surpass you, rather than see them, go under. And we never want that to happen. But it's an industry, though, for undergrads that people, not everybody, it's not a straight line there. People kind of get there by doing other type of work and then finding themselves there. And at least that's how it is with me and a lot of folks that I know. And it's like a club, but we're friendly and everything like that. And we are open, and it's full of intelligent people and wise people. But it is still an industry, so there's stuff to be said about that as well. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
I do have a question. Can I ask you? First of all, thank you for coming and welcome. It's lovely to see you here.
Thank you.
So I guess I have two quick questions. One is about physically publishing a magazine and I guess how you think about whether there's a different readership for the physical magazine than for all of the work that you do online, how you try to speak to both of those different readerships or communities. So that was kind of one. And then I wanted to just ask about the process of the journal moving from Northern to Southern California and how that's been received, or if it's changed where you get submissions from, or just how you think about the internal act of balancing within publishing this really amazingly diverse state with so many different Native communities. And so just kind of how your decision process happens around that.
Okay, those are excellent questions. Thank you so much. I'm glad I have the opportunity to talk about those things. Okay, so yes, the readership, a lot of times we've been asked, especially in recent years, if we would prefer the magazine to go digital. And we are very much against that because a number of tribal communities that we serve still don't have internet access. A lot of them don't. My reservation, my mother's allotment, for example, I mean, I can never move back home because it's not feasible for them to put in internet infrastructure into the area where she lives. So those folks, and especially we saw during the pandemic, a lot of folks were really, really disconnected. A lot of folks that are in rural communities, like places like Happy Camp in Northern California, or, they would have lost, connection to other tribal communities completely if we had, if we only had a digital publication. So that's one part. So we like keeping a physical copy of the magazine. The other piece of that is, I hear a lot with the work that I do, I hear people say things like, well, nobody reads anymore, or books are becoming obsolete, and all these other kind of things like that. The reason that I can't buy into that is, like one of our sales guy had said before, once upon a time, everybody thought audiobooks were just gonna wipe print books out and everything like that. And what really ended up happening is there was a place for both of them. And the other side of it is, with the publication, with the magazine and the submissions and everything like that, what ends up happening is sometimes we can't accommodate. We have limitations on page count and all that sort of thing. Sometimes we have themes, and sometimes we can't make space for everybody at a particular time. And so I'll tell people, well, you can either wait a couple of seasons or a year, basically, to have your piece published, or we can put it up online tomorrow. People will wait that year because they want to be in a print publication. There's still some legitimacy to that because anybody can put anything up on the internet. So there is room and space for all of those things. For the magazine, we had an internal joke within communities and everything like that. We used to call News from Native California down in the South, we called it News from Northern California because it was so northern focused and everything like that. But it's been really welcoming, and people have been, we don't leave the northern people out, because I mean, if you see, in the little short documentary, like, the cultures in the North are stunning, just beautiful, and their cultures are rich, and it's just, there's so much going on there. But we have a lot of really cool stuff in the South too. Our cultures are rich, and people love bird singing and bird dancing. I mean, and there's hundreds of bird singers and dancers and stuff. So there's a lot going on here too. So it's been very well received to be able to, our expanding the range and more of what we do. The challenging part is there are, as you said, a diverse amount of tribes. There's 110 federally recognized and more than 50 non-recognized tribes. And I mean, it's like almost close to 200. So the piece that drives me and that it's agonizing at the same time is trying to have representation of everybody. Like, I'm thinking, okay, what tribal group is on the cover this time, and and then ages too. Are there too many young people? Are there too many? Or have we represented enough elders? Are there children? Those sorts of things like that. I will concede to the fact that I do favor youth. I mean, college age humans are my favorite human beings. I love working with college age people and everything like that. And I do believe, I call it job security, to have, we publish children's books, and I always fight for our children's books. I said, this is job security. We need new young readers and all that good stuff. So yeah, those are, I hope that answered your question. Yeah, good. Thank you.
We had one question over here and one over there. I'm just going to collect. If you have a question, put your hand up.
Okay, yeah, my question was just about like the design of the publication and like how it's shifted over time, or like how the composition of the sections that you decide to like bring on or get rid of, like how does the form of the News from Native California like shift to adapt to either like a shifting understanding of the mission or like things that are happening historically? Yeah, anything you want to share about that?
Some stuff sticks and some stuff doesn't stick. I mean, I tried to do this little like kind of bridge. I'd come up with the column and it didn't really stick. It was like a bridge between the online community and the people that were running that were reading the print magazine to kind of, highlight, oh, this is what's been going on online and everything. And it didn't really, sometimes there's space for it, most of the time there's not. But those particular columns are the ones that have kind of stuck, that there's always content for, that there's always demand for. I was really sad and discouraged during the pandemic when there were no events going on, and there were a bunch of online, it hurt my heart because, everything was online and oh my gosh, people are being left out of this. So our online calendar stayed, but a lot of the print issues of the magazine during that time, the majority of them didn't have the print calendar just because there was nothing happening. But during that time also, we had a lot more submissions and our subscribership went up because, but the publishing industry as a whole did very, very well during that time because I know there was only so much internet people could engage in, and then they started reading books and stuff and, magazines and stuff. So we did very, very well. But yeah, the columns are, from just in my experience for the, in August it'll be 10 years that I've been with Heyday. It's just the things that stick, and the calendar, big times, little times, in our languages. In our languages, sometimes we have them and sometimes we don't, because some tribal groups of people are very protective of their languages and don't want to share in that way, and we don't want to violate anybody's boundaries. And there's some people that their languages have been featured multiple times just because they do want to be able to reach their tribal members that are maybe in a different area that want to engage in the language. So sometimes we have them, sometimes we can't find people that want to engage in language. Luckily now, our intern that we have now, she's a language advocate. Her and her father are Hoopa language teachers and everything like that. And so she's really, really adamant. In fact, the summer issue of the magazine is going to focus on language. So we've been able to keep that one pretty healthy. Thank you.
Good afternoon. What's the relationship between the Native citizens and the state in which they live in and the federal government? Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, wow, that is a complicated question. Thank you for that. Oh, gosh. Well, if you ask somebody that's from a non-federally recognized tribe, they're going to have a completely different answer for you than somebody from a federally recognized tribe. And then in those tribal groups, yeah, it depends on what their history has been like engaging. And a lot of that has to do with socioeconomic stuff. A lot of that has to do with, cultural history and background and everything, but just, I guess, in a general way, I would just describe it as fraught, I'd say. Thank you.
I think that's a great answer. Any other questions? No? I sort of have if I could.
Did you?
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you so much for the talk. I was curious how you source the content that you do end up publishing in your magazine from communities, like whether you have to whether there's a lot of enthusiasm to submit. I guess you mentioned that it kind of maybe waxes and wanes, but also whether there's any in-person component to going and building those relationships and also maintaining those relationships over time. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Yes, my favorite part of the work that I do is being able to get on the road and meet people and engage with tribal communities directly and stuff. And so sometimes there are a few communities that are really, really rural, and you have to touch base at least once, to get people to kind of, engage with the publication and be a part of the work that we do sometimes. It's gotten a lot easier from the time that I started. When I first started 10 years ago, I used to stress, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're not gonna have enough to fit the 48 pages, and everything. And now that's not a problem anymore. It's like, oh gosh, we're gonna have to hold this, or we're not gonna be able to publish this piece and everything like that. you will find a lot of times that we feature a lot of the same writers, because these are the folks that get it done, and everything. A lot of people have a ton of ideas and don't necessarily know that we're primarily a submission-based publication, and they think we have like writers and reporters and everything like that. And we're doing a little bit of that. Like we're gonna have a Berkeley Fellow for 2 years this coming year to do reporting, to be like a weekly or a reporter at least, to do some of that work. But that stuff gets to be hard, and there's important stories. Like one of actually the author of Bad Indians came to us with, there's a region, I think around Altadena, and I'm not sure if this is a problem now because of, unfortunately, the fires and everything, but there were some diseased acorns, and I just was like, somebody has to do this, but I couldn't find anybody to write that story. So it does get to be challenging, and there's so much going on, and so many people are just like, can you report on this? Can you talk about that? And it's just like, oh my gosh, I wish, but we do the best that we can. That's why I'm glad we have like big times, little times, so at least if we can do like briefs on things, to kind of let people know what's going on or where to get more information. But yeah, that's a challenge. Thank you for bringing that up.
We have time for a couple more questions, I think.
Good.
If there isn't any, I have one.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So I really was struck by your comment around Baja being California. And I wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit about, you only presented really about Heyday, but I know you're also an author. So I was wondering if you would be kind to share some of how you see your role as an author in relation to your role as an editor and a publisher, and how you inhabit that multiplicity of roles. And I don't want to give away too much, but I know that you have a project in the future that is sort of connected about your own experiences more in Latin America, Central America, which speaks a lot to this issue of a multiplicity of engagements and another way of understanding relationality across, beyond and against colonial borders. So I wonder if, you could talk about that as well, because there's more.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah, California, I will start by saying that California is the love of my life. I love California. I think it's the best place to be. I think it's beautiful. I think it represents every ecosystem in the world and everything. I mean, I love it. I just love California so much, but I love the world. I've been through traveling and everything like that. And this is something, I'm glad you asked about that, because people don't ask tribal people about travel, about our experiences in travel, but we have traveled all the time. People have migrated, people have visited each other, and all across this hemisphere for a very, 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 very long time. And we published a book a few years ago, I think it was 2021. We published a book called An Indian Among Los Indígenas, and it inspired me so much. It's a book by Ursula Pike. She's another Karuk. We have a lot of Karuk authors, but she's a Karuk author, and she talked about her experience as a California Native person in her time in Bolivia in the Peace Corps, and how she was inadvertently participating in colonialism. It's an amazing book. It really inspired me, because I thought, I travel a lot, and I know a lot of other Native people that travel a lot, and I engage, when I'm not traveling, I engage a lot in the travel space, all of the TikTok and the Instagram influencers and stuff of these travel influencers. And I see so many demographics represented, but there's nothing out there about tribal people who travel. And I want to build that genre out a little bit. So I have a book that I'm now contracted to finish that's supposed to be published in 2026 about my experiences as a traveler. A lot of it's about my time in Cuba. I love Cuba. And a lot of it's just about, my domestic travel and different places I've been to in South and Central America. The piece that I want to emphasize the most is about, as being global neighbors, about, these people, the folks that we're visiting, we're visitors, we are visitors, and people aren't there to serve us, they're working. And I'd like people to be able to learn from a Native perspective on, what it's like to be a good neighbor in the world. And yeah, that's part of the project. Thank you.
Any last questions?
Oh, goodness, sorry. Sorry about that, everybody.
can be loud.
Oh, sorry
okay.
about that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, for Zoom, I'm sorry. So I just wanted to invite you to talk a little bit more about children's books because you said that you fought hard for them. And so I just was hoping you could share a little bit more about why you feel like those are especially important to publish as well.
Oh, yes. Every time I table with books, if we don't sell completely out of children's books, we're almost there. Children's books, especially for this, California Native people, it's a big world, but it's a severely marginalized group of people. And children being able to have the opportunity to see themselves reflected is something that I feel like is really, really important, and that other people feel like is important as well. There's this idea that there's a scholar by the name of Rupert Costo, the current scholar, Rousseau's a war soldier, did a lot of research about him and his society that he had put together. But he talked about pan-Indianism being pretty dangerous to our identities as California Native people. Being able for children to be able, there's a book that we published called Coyote at the Big Time. It was authored and illustrated by an artist by the name of Lynn Risling. And it's a 1, 2, 3 book, for toddlers. And if you go through each of the pages, there's a different tribal representation. Like, so you see Pomo people, and Pomos represented, you see Maidu people represented, you see bird singing people represented. It's really, really special. I like the idea of children being able to just see their cultures reflected, that they don't have to look into another region or another area, that there's something close that they can identify with. And children's books are a little bit hard. They're expensive to produce, and they're limited on the amount of money they make. But I was sharing earlier in a conversation that we have a book that we just recently published called I Love Salmon and Lamprey, and it's by a Yurok engineer and named Brooke Thompson, and it's an adorable, precious little book about her journey growing up, seeing the fish kills on the Klamath River and everything, and how it inspired her to be an engineer, a scientist, to try to help fight for her river and for the animals that live in the river. That book was published, or the pub date was March 15th, and it's a month later, and it's already almost sold out of the first print run. So yeah, children's books are very, very important, and they do sell, and I am so here for them. Thank you.
We have questions maybe for one more?
Anybody else?
Okay, well, in that case, Terria, thank you so much for sharing your amazing work with us.
Thank you for having me. This has been a really cool experience. Thank you.